my colleagues here a bit on how this book came about. I guess I started writing it. I first came up with this story that grew into a whole trilogy and a whole offshoot personal mythology that of a lot of other bigger works. It concerns beings from another dimension who are another world, another reality, who have, by some mysterious means, been living amongst us and carrying on their own secret feuds for generations under the noses of reality as we know it. And I think this came about at a point in my life where I was first really feverishly reading a lot of old fantasy, Tolkien of course, and as well as pulp, sword and sorcery fantasy authors such as Robert E. Howard, Michael Moorcock, Fritz Leiber, and of course I'd always been, a big fan of adventure, sci-fi, fantasy in film. And I think it's not uncommon for people with vivid imaginations who like to escape, as you were saying, to also daydream about, what if I got swept up in this kind of adventure story and things got crazy and fantastical just in the world around me. And if, you live in a very picturesque, naturally beautiful landscape like Vermont that also has its share of weirdness and eccentricity culturally, then, that's, an easy imaginative leap. And also, as anyone who's actually gotten themselves into real life dangerous, frightening situations that, can happen sometimes knows that, once things get real, it's a lot more terrifying and a whole different thing than what it looks like in the movies. So when I came up with a premise and started running with it of, how, with some internal logic, a fantasy adventure story might unfold in real life, or if, when those kinds of elements, intruded upon real life, how it gets to looking more and more like a horror story, and the more you realize that someone who had it in themselves to, rise to that occasion and surmount the kinds of challenges and dangers you'd face would also probably be a pretty terrifying person on a lot of levels. And it's just, the whole trilogy grew out from there, and the first two books are out, and the third one, as well as a prequel novel set entirely in this other world, have both been contracted by the publisher, Damnation Books. And, I think I'll read this nice, weird, creepy chapter here that introduces the antagonists of the novel. The terminal was mostly empty this late, so the information office was locked and dark. A few caffeine-fueled patrons sat around, waiting on late-night connections. Cops strolled through and woke a sleeping man to see his ticket, making sure he wasn't a vagrant. Near a connector gate, a soldier on his way back to duty stretched out and dozed, using his duffel bag as a pillow. A massive Mennonite woman in full regalia, fanning bonnet and all, changed her baby's diaper on a table in the cafe. Everyone must have assumed the ticket clerk had gone home. Had anyone peered close through the office blinds, they'd noticed the faint, bluish glow still flickering. Had they pressed ear to glass, they'd have heard two soft 11-year-old voices, one boy and one girl, interspersed with the faint mutterings. Tonight's ticket clerk had worked the afternoon shift 2 days ago. Both kids wore plain clothes made from a chemically treated hemp that rarely left stray fibers behind, but from which DNA traces slid like water off a duck just in case. The soles of their leather sandals were similarly coated. You could tell they were twins by their faces, though their hair threw some people off. The boy's fair blonde, scruffy, getting longish, so it hung in his eyes. The girl's reddish brown, neatly combed, hanging midway to her waist. Tonight she'd tied it back, out of the way of the delicate work before her. They'd exhausted their last lead, another clerk who worked here, in a gas station bathroom on his way home. "You're doing it all wrong!" The girl shoved the boy back so his fingertips slid out of the slick, softening brain matter. The clerk stopped singing the Tom Petty song. Hopefully the sudden jostle hadn't damaged the brain, screwing up the interrogation. "Is that a one-way or a round-trip ticket to Baltimore, sir?" the clerk drooled. "Hear that?" asked the boy. "I'm on the right track. Let me try and—" "You just got lucky. Found the right pathways. You gotta follow all the steps Grandpa taught us." "I was!" "No, you weren't. Here, I'll show you." With that, her fingertips pressed the same area. The clerk muttered what sounded like some kind of drill, the office's opening procedure. So she massaged the brain some more, then leaned forward and whispered. Her fingers trailed around rhythmically, pressed harder, pressed softer, moving fast then slow. Into the clerk's ear she described aspects of her older sister's most basic movements, voice patterns, and aura. This clerk probably couldn't see auras, but he'd make the connection once she tapped into the right pathways. She described her sister's present appearance as close as she knew for sure, from a security camera still her father had tracked down half a year ago in a Detroit train station. Hopefully it was close enough to register, assuming the clerk had even seen Sally. "It's not working," groaned the boy. "Come on, sissy. She must have left town some other way. We'll talk with Mom and Dad and we'll figure something else out." Ignoring him, she spoke in a nearly perfect imitation of her older sister's voice. "Hey, how much is a ticket to—" She cut herself off. The man stayed silent. She repeated the same phrase several times with different inflections, then rephrased the question. "Excuse me, I'd like to buy a one-way bus ticket to—" "Can I get a ticket to—" "Say, when does the next bus leave for—" Sheldon stood by fidgeting. "It ain't working, sissy," she huffed. "So when's the next bus leave headed—" The boy's eyes trailed to a glass-framed U.S. map. "What about the neutral states?" Sissy winced, then paused. However she might shift or shrug the rest of her body, her fingers froze stone still in the brain goo. "Didn't you already try that?" "Not the current ones." "What was the nearest one before she ran off?" Sissy, who prided herself as a geography and history student, bent back over the clerk. "So will this get me to Vermont?" When the clerk didn't answer, she almost moved on. Then she tried other inflections. Where in Vermont you want to go, miss? Her fingers shifted, pressed again, and the clerk said in a rough facsimile of Sally's voice, "Well, how far'll it get me?" When Sissy pressed again, he answered. Blocks away, a black Buick sat parked in deep shadow. Within, two adults dressed identically to the children who just interviewed the clerk. Both were stout and stoic, the man short with white hair, the woman tall and dark-haired. Her hands stayed folded, ready to spring to the glove box for the Magnum. Since leaving the decimated van on the roadside an hour north, they'd done nothing to raise any profile. From the moment that driver blubbered where he and his friends had kicked out the hitchhiker, the family knew the mindset they'd need for this. Already death might have scented out this car, might be circling slowly inward. As the twins came ghost-like up the street, their mother's eyes peered hard into the shadows around them. The spires of a cubic tower gashed the skyline like black glass slivers, barely passing for a simple office block to earthline eyes. The children's silent poise held till they opened the door, then they scrambled in. "She's headed for some place called Brattleboro," blurted Sheldon. "In Vermont." The parents exchanged looks. Vermont had been neutral territory till about a year ago, when a cluster of wandering Shawmite kids broke truce. By the end of the skirmishes, the Crimbone had established control, and it had proved profitable for them. Of course, the Shawmite cabinet insisted the original aggressors were Spirelites in it, and it had been the Shawmites who'd managed to move in and set up their base of peacekeeping. Factoring in manpower and threat of exposure against Vermont's loss, the secret police tribunal decided to cut their losses for the foreseeable future. Not Brat-O, Sheldon. Brat-Ol. Yeah, he's right, though. It's in Vermont. "You covered your tracks like we went over, right?" asked their dad. "Yes," they practically sang in harmony. Sheldon passed Dad the plastic bottle of the eroding fluid with which he'd sprayed down the body, along with anywhere else in the office where they might have left fingerprints. "No one saw us either," added Sissy. "We slipped into the office in the afternoon when the guy left on his lunch break, stayed real quiet and still and out of sight, then waited till he locked up. Once we were done with him, we left through a side door so no one in the lobby saw. Good going." We should get on the road," said Mom. Everyone nodded. Sissy and Sheldon's work wouldn't be discovered till morning, but it wasn't the cops they were racing in this city. "True," said Dad, "but it shouldn't be a problem. The only connections the Earthline police could make at any time soon would be to Indiana or Tennessee. Unless Sally's gotten very sloppy, they won't. Even if they do, I don't much see how they could trace her to this Brattleboro place." "They have security cameras in bus stations," Mom noted. "I disabled the cameras," Sheldon said. "Then I traced the wire to where they keep the tapes and I sprayed them down." Dad answered Mom, "Like I said, unless she's gotten very sloppy, they won't have an accurate facial descriptions to match those tapes. Still, good thinking, Sheldon." In the back seat, Sheldon grinned. The family drove off, silent because there was nothing to speak about, at least nothing the parents would discuss around their children, or vice versa. Sheldon saw Sissy's scorn, like he didn't have the right to seek Mom and Dad's favor when he thought of something she hadn't. Instead of punching her in the ribs, he turned and looked out the window for a while. When he glanced back, she still stared off sullenly, so he gave her a playful jab. She winced, so he persisted till she giggled and jabbed back. By and by she got sleepy, so he gathered her ponytail and spent the next 15 minutes, weaving it into a single whip-like braid. Growing drowsier, she settled back against him. Soon they were both asleep, holding each other the way Earthline children hugged their teddy bears. Soon the Buick was on the interstate, headed for Vermont. Questions?
So where did that come from, exactly?
Well, that just came out of just somewhere the idea occurred to me of this secret otherworldly race of people. They're secret police fighting factions. Are a family bloodline, like the thing about Spiralites, you're born into family traditions, and you're have the genetics for certain skill sets ingrained into you, and you're trained in things like fighting and interrogation pretty much since you're old enough to walk. So I thought the best creepy way to introduce this was to introduce two little kids who are this lethal and dangerous, and still have them acting like kids. They bicker like anyone who's ever been on a car trip with siblings, they banter and bicker like little kids do. It's like, kids, stop arguing about who has the highest body count, or I'm going to turn this car around, and I thought, juxtaposing that and showing how all this weirdness and grotesquerie is just, normal to them was a great, wickedly fun way to introduce you to this world and this side of it. Yes?
It sounds like the kids have the ability to touch this guy's head as if their fingers were electrodes.
Oh, it's brain.
Yeah, they've removed the top of his skull and have him sedated and partially conscious, and one of their skill sets is to poke around in his brain and try to get him to start speaking information they need.
I was going to ask how they were able to do that without killing the guy, unless they're natural surgeons or something.
Well, like I said, that's one of the things that these otherworldly people are like. If you're born into a family of their secret police, then that's one of the things that they're trained from since a very young age. And you're right on the same page where the reader is supposed to be at this point in the story, because all of this is steadily revealed and unfolds and explained later as we get to know these creatures better. But at this point in the story, you're kind of supposed to be going, what the heck?
How did they do that?
Yeah.
Are there fingers in their brain? Oh my god, it's in the brain.
Yep, exactly.
I would call it delightfully disturbing imagery.
Hey.
Very well made, very well written.
Oh, I thank you.
I'm looking forward to diving into it.
Oh, excellent.
And that's how I know you're good at your genre, because I'm not. Looking forward to diving into that. I was feeling a little bit uncomfortable over here because I'm just like creeped out, which is how I know you're good at what you do.
Oh, I thank you, thank you. That's, that is, that kind of uncomfortable and creeped out is, a thing that, people who read this genre, go for. So, I hope that...
I know lots of people that go for that kind of thing.
Excellent! Yes.
Not really for me.
disturbed, uncomfortable, creeped
No,
out.
I'm this.
If my story makes me feel like I just touched your consciousness in a creepy, inappropriate way and made you feel really uncomfortable, then I've done my job as a writer correctly.
One of the things that Stephen King does in his book is approach it from a real world perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the way that the dialogue is so real.
Mm-hmm.
You have a gift with that. It's very similar in that style as in you can see these people having these conversations, these siblings, you know, like you said, talking about, okay, if you guys don't stop arguing about who has the highest body count, turn this car around. It's so awesome.
Spot
I
on.
love it.
Thank you.
Speaking of Lance Henriksen, I was reminded the movie Near Dark when you're talking about vans.
Yes.
Oh, yes!
Exactly.
I was like, oh, this is the creepy family out on the road.
Yep. Oh, one of my favorite movies.
Yep. Very well done.
Thank you.
So what's yours, Jason?
Any other questions from
Alrighty.
One final round of applause for all.